Oh, folks, look at that gorgeous sopapillas. You just want one right now, don't you? Well, watch the video. It's not that hard to make, and you're going to like it when you try it. I wanted to do a video today on the sopapilla. The sopapilla is a really cool thing, and it's used mostly in this area as a dessert item. Although sometimes it can be used for savory dishes too, just by filling it. Now the sopapilla is a pastry. It's a fried bread, and it's considered a Mexican dish. However, it really needs to be mentioned, and there's a lot of people who will fiercely fight about this. It needs to be mentioned, this is a New Mexican dish, okay? But it is not a United States dish per se. Let me explain something. This dish goes back like about 200 years. And so it's believed that this dish was invented around the Albuquerque area in New Mexico 200 years ago. And that was like 100 years prior to when New Mexico became a state. I think they became a state, what, in I want to say it's 1912. I might be wrong, and if I am, somebody correct me there. But I think it was like on the 6th of January of 1912. Let's get past that. The sopapilla was invented a long time prior to the U.S. So it's really a blending of the cultures of Hispanic culture from Mexico and the culture that already existed in Albuquerque, which is where there were pueblos. So you had Pueblo Indians living in that area that had been living there for a very long time. So it was pretty much, they're the natives of the area. And then of course later on comes the United States, and New Mexico becomes a state. The sopapilla stuck around, and it is still popular today, and it is wonderful. When it's made right, it's puffed up, the bread is still just a little bit soft, and it's, in my view, it's best served with honey. Some people like it with sugar and with cinnamon, but either way, it's flat delicious, and it's a wonderful cultural item for the United States. This is part of our history and part of who and what we are. So folks, please enjoy this. This is sopapillas. Let's get in the kitchen. Come on. Here we are with these wonderful ingredients that we have. I have over here some flour, milk, some lard, or if you want, you can use shortening. Right here, this is some salt and baking powder. And don't confuse that for baking soda, folks. For this dish, you have to have baking powder because you need some sort of a catalyst for the soda that's in it. Baking powder is like baking soda. It has baking soda in it, but it also has other ingredients that cause that soda to give off carbon dioxide. And when you have a dish like this that is low on acid, that is the stuff you have to use. Now that's sort of where we get into how this is different as a modern dish than what it was when it was originally invented. When this dish was invented, this stuff did not exist. It was not invented until 1849. There was a smart man who, a scientist I believe he was, that decided to produce this for his wife to improve her baking in the kitchen, to make her baking easier. So anyway, you need baking powder. So originally I would say 200 years ago, this was probably an unleavened bread. In other words, nothing in it to make it rise, and it was a little more flat and probably not puffed up. Maybe it was, a little more crispy. Okay, so different ways over time, things change and evolve, and that's what we have here. Over on the side, I have this beautiful pan filled with lard. Yeah, you heard me right. I said lard. Look at that right there. So what we're going to be doing is melting that lard and cooking this off in lard. That might sound a little crazy, but the whole idea here is I wanted to make this dish as much as it was made 200 years ago. 200 years ago, they did not have peanut oil or vegetable oil or canola oil or corn oil. None of that was around. Olive oil existed, but it was at a premium, and it was not common. So what was common was animal fats. You had lard and tallow. Lard was abundant, and it was low cost. So that's most likely what would have been used. So I choose it to bring a little more of that natural flair and flavor to this dish. When it comes time to make this wonderful simple dish, the first thing we need to do is to mix together all of our dry ingredients. Used to be you would sift your dry ingredients together. In this case, it's really not necessary for this type of recipe, but you do have to combine things so that they're combined thoroughly. You don't want a clump of baking powder in someone's sopapilla. That would be awful. So I mix that in there. I'm just going to use a simple whisk. Isn't that easy? Okay, those ingredients are mixed. That's all it took. Now that we have everything mixed here, let's go ahead and get that fat down in there. Boom, there we go. Come on, get in there. And I'm going to use this little guy. This little tool is called a pastry blender. Mine is very old, it's old-fashioned, and the new ones work just the same as the old. And the whole idea here is to take the fat that you're working with and to be able to cut it into smaller pieces. You can use your hands for this. Just get your hands in there and get the flour on them and start breaking that lard into small pieces, okay? That's all it takes. So we have lard in this right here, and what that does is it helps the dough to be soft and supple. It provides a way of retaining moisture to the dough and works really well. It's an old-fashioned recipe. It's the way biscuits have been made for a very long time. It's just the way things should be done. And again, like I said, lard is not an unhealthy thing. So guys, get out of the frame of mind where you think that it is. It's not. Next thing I need to do is get this stirred in. You can use that pastry blender. So far I've put in about 3/4 of a cup. I haven't put it all in there. There we go. And all this does is it just keeps your hands from getting totally messed up to begin with. They're going to get a little dough on them, but don't worry about that. Okay, there we go. So it is starting to form up. And that's the beginning of what we want. Now my hands, I want to fix them so that the dough doesn't stick as much. I'm going to put a little bit of flour in one hand. I'm just going to rub it over them. Okay. It's less likely to stick now. It still will, but it won't be as bad. Now, let me explain something. When it comes to proportions on your ingredients, in a little bit you're going to be given the actual ingredient amount, okay, how much of each of these ingredients I used. But it needs to be said that flour is fickle, all right? To be simple about it, flour is very, very fickle. It is the strangest ingredient I've ever worked with, even though it's so simple. Flour, let me set that aside. Get my board floured here. Flour is strange in that the same brand of flour that is, let's say, a different season, one season from another, the two flours may absorb moisture differently one from the other. So while a recipe may take, this time it may take, let's say, 3/4 of a cup, the next time it may take all of a cup, or just slightly less than 3/4, you never know. It's different each time. And so you have that strange fickle quality that dough has, and that's it right there. Now, so you will know, baking, what we're dealing with here, this is baking powder. Baking powder goes at it twice, okay? There's two different reactions. When you first mix something together with baking powder and you get liquid in there and all that, and it activates, okay? And that's what's happening now. It is activated. When that happens, your dough then begins to rise, okay? And that's what we call leavening the dough, you know, giving it something that causes it to rise up. Some doughs are yeast doughs, and this one is a little different. This uses baking powder. So here's the thing, I've kneaded that more than enough. It doesn't need a lot of working. I just need to kind of set it here and give it a little extra flour. I want to set it there. I want to cover this. You can cover it with plastic wrap or a towel. You just want to kind of keep it moist. That's all we're covering it for. And once it has rested, it needs to rest about 20 minutes. Then we'll take this and we're going to roll it into the shapes that we need to start making our sopapillas. Wonderful. I have given this about 30 minutes to rest. It has actually risen a little bit. It's a little bit softer than it was before. It hasn't risen a lot, and it's not like I've got a yeast dough here that's really going to puff up on me. So what I'm going to do here is take this, and I'm just going to kind of divide it as much down the middle as possible. It doesn't have to be exact. So you'll know what I'm using here. This little item is called a pastry knife. If you've ever seen those, you wondered what that was. That's what it is. I want to set that aside. You notice I put a little extra flour on it when I put it over on the side, and that way it doesn't stick. So I want to take this, and I'm just going to kind of press it out as best I can into something of a circle. If I had started with a good ball, it would have been better. Now, if you'll notice, the shape I'm making is just horrible. It's not round, it's not uniform, but you know what? It won't matter, okay? Because once these are cut, they'll be just fine. So what I'm going for here isn't super thin, but I'm looking for about the thickness of your typical flour tortilla. Now, once I've done this, I can quarter this thing. And by the way, now I can go ahead and start melting that lard. So I'm going to take this one. I'm just going to kind of cut him this way, and a couple of extra cuts there. Now, those I will fry up to be sopapillas. Beautiful. Now this one, I'm going to take it, I'm going to make it a little more round if I can. Who knows, I might succeed, I might fail. Alrighty, looks like my lard is starting to melt down really nice here. As soon as that is fully liquefied and it comes up in temperature to 325 degrees, that's when I'm going to go ahead and start making my sopapillas. This is coming up in temperature. It is just about 325 degrees. I've got about another 5 degrees to go. It's not going to really matter that much. But I wanted to mention this to you. You want them to cook around 325. Keep it below 350 and above 300. But that 325 is your sweet zone there, okay? And take one of these. I'm going to drop it down in the oil. And if life treats us fair and wonderful and beautiful, then we're going to get a beautiful sopapilla. Drop it in there, wait for it to puff up. So if you'll notice, there's not like a huge amount of activity going on here. Once it puffs a little bit, we'll take him and flip him over. We'll drop another one in there. It does not take long. You simply want to cook it until that beautiful golden color forms and your sopapilla is finished. There we go, a little more close-up shot. Oh, there it is. This one's a little darker than I normally do them. The quantities of all of the ingredients that we have used today, I started with 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of milk, and remember that's add milk until you've used what you need to make the dough at the right consistency. 1 tablespoon of baking powder. That's a double acting baking powder, folks. You need both actions on it. On this, it's 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of lard. You can also use shortening for this. That's all there is to it, and it's a simple and easy recipe to do. Folks, look at these. This is gorgeous sopapillas. We're going to take these wonderful sopapillas, hit them with a little bit of honey here in just a moment, and enjoy them as a most natural and wonderful way to do a fried bread. Wait till you try this one. You're going to love it. There they are, folks. Beautiful, beautiful sopapillas. Folks, if you've never had them, then you've really missed out. Let me get some honey here. I've been enjoying these since I was a little kid. They are really popular in Tex-Mex restaurants and Mexican restaurants in Texas. Oh. That's what I remember. That delicate soft bread, a light crunch on the outside, just so tender, yet soft and doughy still. That's a sopapilla, and that's a good one. Folks, wait till you try them. You're going to be enjoying these. If you want, dust them with a little cinnamon and sugar. That works real good. Some people like to use powdered sugar. Nah, that's not for me. The stuff blows around too easy and it gets all over the place. It's kind of messy. So when it comes to sopapillas, no powdered sugar. Stick with granulated sugar and a little cinnamon if you want that, or keep it simple and enjoy the honey. Thank you for watching, folks. And please, enjoy your sopapillas.